Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. As we get started and we center ourselves in today's space, we would love for you to share in the chat your location and what is giving you hope. Welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're coming to us from. So as you join us, we would love for you to share in the chat box your location and what is giving you hope. I will share, we'll do introductions as we move into the work, but I'm coming from Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I will share as people are entering. We are sharing in the chat where we are from, where we're coming from, and what's giving us hope. It is snowing here in Kalamazoo, Michigan, so I will share verbally that what is giving me hope is my daughter coming out of her bedroom and into my bedroom this morning and being so excited for the snow. And her words were, it's magical because she didn't see any snowflakes fall from the sky. She just woke up and it was on the ground. And so that brought me a lot of joy and a lot of hope this morning. Hope that maybe we can all find a little magic in the day to day. All right. We are going to wait one more minute and let people come in, and then we're going to honor our time together here today. All right, everyone. It's very exciting. Thank you for sharing your grounding in the chat box. We appreciate you. I won't speak for Dr. Fisher, but I can guess that we feel a bit of a special kinship with our audience. Dr. Fisher and I met in North Carolina, and so it feels pretty special to see so many people from an area that we are really familiar with. And it's great to have you all here, and we're glad that you're here. So let's get started. We are going to talk today about bridging dialogue for change. And this is a session focused on course conflict mediation skills. And this is part of a larger program that we provide here at Developing Capacity Coaching. And today, as a part of our free workshop, we're going to introduce some basic, like core conflict mediation skills. We're going to talk about a hands-on introduction to we call it our BDC program, our Bridging Dialogue for Change. And the purpose of today and also the larger program is really to empower facilitators with skills and frameworks that you need to guide transformative dialogues from a healing lens, from a space of dignity, love, and equity. And so today we're really excited to be sharing all of this with you. And one of the things that we would love for you to do is if you are working through the workshop with us today and you're realizing that this is really beneficial for you or might be more beneficial for your team, we're going to drop in our contact form. It's very straightforward. You just let us know if you want to connect afterwards and talk more about the larger program that is the Bridging Dialogue for Change. So as we move into today, one of the things that we want to begin with as part of our core values is a land labor solidarity acknowledgement. And so we recognize that regardless of where everyone is coming from today, many of us, if not all of us, are actually gathered on ancestral lands. I am on the lands of the Three Fires tribes, and we have been and they have been stewards of this generation or of this land long before we came to be here. And so we honor the resilience and the ongoing connection, not only to the land, but to the water and to the larger community. And we recognize that there is a very painful history of colonization, displacement, erasure that continues to impact our Indigenous colleagues, friends, and family. And so we stand in solidarity with their request to return land and reparations. We also acknowledge the role of enslaved Africans whose forced labor have laid the foundation for the much of the wealth in this country, both literally and physically. And so alongside this exploitation and systemic abuse of Africans was similar treatment for Chinese, Mexican, and Japanese immigrants throughout our history. These are groups that have been enslaved or have been confined based on rules that are happening either worldwide events or the capitalistic tendencies of the United States. And so these legacies of forced labor, exclusion, and exploitation underpin many of the systemic inequities that we work as a company and as a partner to eradicate. And we hope that you will join us in helping to eradicate because they are still continuing to affect our world. Lastly, as we move forward together, we believe and we recognize that solidarity is the path forward to dismantling interlocking systems of oppression. And these are systems of colonialism, racism, capitalism, xenophobia that persist not only in the US, but globally. And so we commit to standing in solidarity with Indigenous peoples, with Black communities, with immigrant workers, and all of those who are impacted by injustice. And we'll hope you join us in that solidarity as you are able and brave. So I want to share a little bit about who we are. Who are we to be offering this workshop to you all? And so we are a small Black female-owned company based out of Chicago, and our purpose is to empower purpose-driven change leaders. And we hope that we empower those leaders to overcome entrenched obstacles, both in leadership, in teams, and in culture. And as a part of our work together, we really aim to partner in a way that delivers measurable success through targeted capacity building, application and strategies, and data informed decision making. So, we offer services in four key areas: personal leadership, team capacity building, organizational culture, and data informed decision making. So, let's talk about today. Today we have three core outcomes for our time together. So my name is CG Heiser. I'm realizing just now we didn't do introductions. My name is CG Heiser, and I'm the Senior Impact and Evaluation Officer. So we have outcomes for our time together because outcomes are near and dear to my heart. And it's how we know, it's how you let us know if you got what you came for today for this session. So our first outcome together for our time is to recognize and identify conflict. Our second outcome is to demonstrate active listening and problem-solving skills with one another. And finally, we'll practice conflict mediation skills in real time. Don't be nervous. We're all safe space. We're all here together. So as we embark on this journey and learning these outcomes together, it's really important that we have a set of established norms. And when I'm done walking through these norms, I would really appreciate it if everyone in the chat could let me know if they'd like to add anything or if they agree with the norms. So let's walk through them. The first is that we invite you to be brave in this space. We really want you to share your experiences. We're going to walk through some core concepts, but then we're very much going to shift to what feels more like a fireside chat for me and Dr. Fisher on this very snowy day. And so in that, we want you to be brave. We want you to share. We want you to be graceful with yourselves and with others. Sometimes an answer may seem obvious when you're outside the problem, and you may feel yourself judging a little bit and say, well, why didn't you just do this? But we really want you to lead into the learning aspect for our colleagues that are in this space today, for one another, and also for ourselves. It is very easy in today's world and our very current divisive climate to get stuck in the challenges, and we want you to name that and own that. We recognize that, and we want to spend our time together naming that challenge, but moving past the challenge to think in terms of possibilities. We believe in the power of collective wisdom. There are a lot of brilliant minds on this call, and so let's come together and think in terms of possibilities. We accept and expect non-closure. This means we're not going to work through everything today that you might hope to work through. And we know that that can be really hard. And so we just invite into the space a sense of acceptance that we might not get through everything you're hoping to get through. We also deeply believe as individuals and as a company that intention does not override impact, and we are responsible for both intention and impact when we're interacting with one another. Finally, what is said here is designed to be a safe space and a confidential space. If you need to story share because it helps advance your organization, please protect the people who shared those stories originally and keep them safe, right? Keep their identity safe, their context safe. We don't want to identify or share someone else's story and risk the perpetuation of harm. So, one of the things that we want you to think about today is what if? What if the harm that is being done in an interaction was being targeted at your daughter, your grandmother, your son, your niece, your nephew, your grandfather, your aunt, your mother, your grandchild, your father, brother, cousin? What if it was being targeted at you? And we want to center our thought in this what if question as we move through the day, because we may not be sharing in a lived experience that someone else may be sharing as we talk about conflict resolution, but it's important to believe people's stories when they tell them to us. And so think about if you can't identify or empathize with their story, imagine if that story was being told to you by someone near and dear to your heart to help you better understand the impact of that harm or of the story that's being told. All right. So we want to check in on you. And we maybe more importantly, we want you to check in on you. And so I want to give you 1 minute to think about this question. In our current times, what is one issue that matters most to you, and how does it impact your community or your personal life? Take 1 minute to think about this, and I'm going to invite a handful of individuals to share their perspectives. 1 minute. All right. As our 1 minute winds down, we're going to pause the recording and invite individuals to share their responses to this question. So thank you so much for sharing. We appreciate you. We're starting the recording again, and we're going to move on to our next question. Dr. Fisher, will you unmute so we can hear your brilliance?
Yes, I will. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Anise Fisher. I'm the founder and CEO of Developing Capacity Coaching, and I'm very excited that you joined us today. Thank you, Dr. Heiser, for the great grounding that you provided and begin to get us to think about what issues are impacting us. Part of why we created this space in these free webinar series, it was actually the idea of Dr. Heiser last year because we began to say, how can we make sure that we contribute to our global humanity, even if people's organizations don't make investment in building capacity? And so this is a continuation of that. We're going to walk you through a way that you can begin to have conversations around conflict And we're going to walk you through that through the next couple of slides. And then you get a handout at the end that will help see how to implement these things into your organization. So the first thing that we always say, if you're going to talk about any topic that might be difficult or polarizing, is to connect to your core. So we're going to model that for you here today. We want you to take a moment to think about, what might this conversation bring up for you? We're assembled here today to talk about core conflict mediation skills in the midst of polarization, in the midst of many things happening in our country. What do you think it would bring up for you? What might be a trigger for you? What might be any identity issues? And we had someone share earlier, I identify as an immigrant, and I'm concerned about my family members, and I'm concerned about myself. And so that's great awareness, because you know that coming into this conversation, there's some emotion around that might influence and impact how we hear from people and how we show up. I want to give people about 60 seconds just to write in your cell phone, or you can write it on a paper, what might trigger you, what identity issues might come up for you in a conversation around conflict skills or dialogue on polarized topics. I would like for everyone to try to participate in this, because this is what we're going to encourage you to do in your organizations before you open the can, is to sit down and think about this. So I'm going to go silent, give you about 60 seconds to just jot down whatever's top of your mind about what might come up for you, trigger biases, identity issues. Any questions about the prompt? Okay, I'm going to go on mute, and this time off again when it's ready to talk. Okay, go ahead and wrap your thought. And I'm going to pause the recording so you can hear from a few folks. You will notice that we'll go back and forth with pause and recording so that your private comment won't show up online. What I want to say here is that the reality is there are a lot of things that can trigger us. There are a lot of things that connect our identity. Me as a Black woman, many of us have diverse identities and also hidden identities as it relates to sexual orientation, our immigration status, and so forth. And all of these things are sitting sometimes visually, but underneath when we get to these conversations. And so the key part of connecting to your core and inviting other people in the room to connect to the core is that you're setting a foundation anchor for folks to be able to say, let me get in touch with my own humanity and know what might come up for me before I begin to engage in conversations with other people. So that's why we utilize the connect to the core. Before I get started, I just want to just share the difference between a dialogue and debate. You all can see it on the screen, but in the end of time, what I will share is that what Dr. Heisen are talking about today in the context of a dialogue. Now, debates happen all the time, and we can have debates with people in lives, but there are two different outcomes. A dialogue really is a space to foster understanding. It's a space you are looking to explore different perspectives. You're looking to build connection. You want to have active listening. Goal is to be collaborative and constructive in nature, but to have curiosity about differing perspectives. And what we believe as an organization is that if we are going to live and work together, then we are going to have to develop an appetite, curiosity to hear different people's perspectives, because we all have to live together in these United States. And it's in hearing those different perspectives that we can begin to figure out where might a bridge be built for us to be able to create a world where everyone's humanity is honored, not if you're a white male or if you are a Black person, everybody. There's enough space here for everybody to be honored. And so that's the key difference between a dialogue. And you do want to make that clear whenever you're having conversations with people about hard topics or polarizing topics. You want to enter in grounding people and the outcomes of what a dialogue is. You want to ground people in norms like we did. And so we are in the midst of polarization, which is really this idea of just starkly distinct perspective where people feel a certain way about an issue and it's complete opposites. And you are in polarization, which a slide next, it'll see how it might show up, is that, when it's at play, there's no middle ground, there's no continuum. People are just in their opposite sides of the view. So how have you all been seeing polarization show up?
I haven't really, not recently anyway. Previously, I think we've seen it definitely in the context of the war in the Middle East, severely in that way, but definitely just people putting a stake in the ground and not having any room for, hearing what other people are saying.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And that's the hard part, because for some issues, as a Black woman, the way that Kamala was discussed and seeing just the way that people responded, that's really hard for me, right? To hear people say that and to, not have a response. And what we want to be clear to say is this workshop is not about saying you abandon your viewpoints and you abandon your perspectives. This is about how do you get a sense of what other people are thinking, and you do that in service of trying to figure out how can we live and work together. How can we get each other to a place where we can show up and be respectful to one another and not try to block any advancement of each other's progress in this country? And in order to do that, we got to be willing to hear from people. And so addressing the trap of polarization, here's what we've noticed, that that polarization is present because they're operating in an I, me, mine perspective. It's very centered on their own viewpoint. And when one is operating in polarization, we offer this move that you can make to create a better outcome. So if someone's coming in saying, all policy on immigration that does not involve people coming through standard processes is wrong, you can put your hand up in the chat box if you've heard someone say something similar. That's a very polarized perspective. There's no middle ground. There's no discussion of the fact that, people are coming to the United States for better opportunity because of harm that's been created by the United States in their own countries. One, you can handle that perspective in a conversation is to say, what other perspectives exist? So this person is coming in, dogging in their perspective. Just what other perspectives exist? What you're doing is saying to that person in the moment, your perspective is not the only one that exists in this world. And so I want to invite in other viewpoints. But what we find is when people come in with that sort of dogged perspective, it becomes a situation where everybody else is the problem. Use that same example of one has to come into the United States through these formal procedures. It becomes anybody who believes something differently is the problem. And that's deceptive thinking because it just isolates folks. And so what we might ask in that moment is, what multiple things can be true? Multiple things can be. We want people to come into the United States through certain means, and people come into the country through non-standard means because of what we know to be true, documented, is that oftentimes Black immigrants are denied asylum. Oftentimes immigrants from our teen populations are denied asylum. We know that racism is into those systems and structures, and that is in the data. So there multiple things can be true, right? We can have a desire for people to come in, but the system has flaws in it. And then, okay, would say, any unjust law has to be broken. That's my summary. Not what he said exactly. That's a paraphrase of what he said when people were asking him, why are you violating, the law to peacefully protest when the city has said you cannot protest? And he says, hey, if it's an unjust law, that's justification to break it. And then division. What happens is I'm in my own perspective. I can't see it any other way. And then I'm divided. I don't even want to deal with any other perspectives. That's very dangerous because it's very hard for us to get to a place where we can live in solidarity, which is what the Heiser said in the beginning. Solidarity, the outcome of solidarity is this idea. There are multiple needs of people in this country, and we don't have to operate from a supremacist mindset, which means somebody always has to be on the top and somebody always has to be on the bottom. And you got to be on the bottom so I can be on the top. Solidarity means there's enough space for all of us to have equal and shared resources. So when someone is coming in, again, polarized, a move that you can make, how can we create the conditions to honor our shared humanity? Now, you might get an eye roll, that's okay. But again, we are bringing people to the place. I'm not feeding into a mindset that it has to be either or. I'm feeding into a mindset as what can be done to create the conditions to honor our shared humanity. And some people may say, oh, it's so hard, we can't do it. You do it every day. You live in a house that people are very different from you, and you make your house work. Right? We have families, we make it work in our families. And I'm breaking down very basic, but this zero sum is not going to help us. Thank you for sharing that in the chat box, Dr. R. So I'm going to, Dr. Heiser and I are going to go back and forth on these 5 core skills. There are many skills that you can take away from. We're going to go back and forth on these 5. And here's where we're going to invite your participation. We're going to give you an example of how it shows up. And then we're going to give you a move that you can make. And again, these moves will be on the handout that you see. But then we want to ask you how you had a challenge with active listening. Where do you get stuck with empathy? Do you get stuck in any of these 5 areas? And let's just talk about, because it's a way for us to build our collective brilliance and for you to be able to get your questions answered in the moment. So the 5 we're going to talk about are listed here. And then we're going to give you a bonus, and we're going to talk about what do you do if somebody says something that is racist or somebody says something that is xenophobic? How to respond in the moment. So we want to provide you with that bonus as well, because that's real when you have conflicting conversations. So the first skill that we want to talk about is active listening. And active listening is this ability to be able to fully engage and hear what people are saying. And you're doing so with the intention to foster dialogue. You're doing so with the intention to open up the dialogue, right? We don't want to shut it down. So I'm sure no one has ever experienced this before, and that's being tongue in cheek. You're in a team meeting and conversations are happening around organizational restructuring. And somebody says, I feel like these changes are happening without considering how they'll affect my daily work. How many people have had that happen in a meeting? Somebody comes in, say there's a restructure. You can just raise your hand physically, or you can put it in the chat box. And folks are like, wait a minute, has anybody thought about this change? How it impacts my job and how it affects me and how I show up. So, and we put this as a peer or a leader, because you don't have to be the person leading the meeting to intervene. And that is something we're trying to communicate here. We all have power and choice that we talk about in developing capacity. So we all can make an intervention. So whether you're the leader of the meeting or the peer, one way to show that you're actively listening could be to say this comment in red. CG, it sounds like you're concerned about the impact on your workload and want more clarity about how this can unfold. Is that accurate? I'm inviting CG into the conversation. I'm not shutting down, trying to make it seem like what she says is irrelevant. This is real for her. This is real people's lives. That attempt of saying, here's what I think I'm hearing from you. Is it accurate? So you're mirroring, trying to get a sense of whether or not that's true, is trying to invite her into the conversation to ensure that she's feeling heard, right? And that she knows that someone is clocking what she has said. We don't always have to wait for the positional leader to do that.
So So we promised you earlier, we gave you the heads up that we would be inviting you in about where you get stuck with active listening. And so we're going to give you a few minutes to think about that. And so to give you that space, I'm going to share an example of active listening that I had the opportunity to experience in my professional lifetime. And so very similar to our scenario here, at one point in my career, I was asked to take over another team whose supervisor had recently retired. And so I was minding my own business over in the assessment and strategic planning world in a higher ed department. I was asked to become the supervisor and leader of the Department of Marketing. And then we had a fourth colleague who whose supervisor had also retired, and he was just sort of floating out in the ether, and he needed a home. And so he was an admin for an office, and he came under our fold as well. And there was a lot of fear in that moment because I didn't have any relationship with any of these humans really. Their prior supervisor had a really resoundingly negative impact on them, and they were fearful that I may have a similar impact. And so one of the things that I said and that we worked through together as a budding team, a nascent team, was that I don't know anything about marketing. I couldn't micromanage you. I couldn't critique your work meaningfully. I don't have any subject matter expertise there. So I told them I was dependent on them to learn about the importance of what they do and how they do it, and that I was in assessment, so I tended to ask a lot of questions. I ask questions for a living. And one of the activities that we embarked on together to create that open dialogue space and start building that trust was an active listening exercise where I asked them to share with me as a group what our strengths were, what our opportunities were, what our greatest aspirations were as individuals doing our work, but also as a new unit. What could we be possible? What could be possible for us? And what results were meaningful to them? And this was, I asked a few questions, but it really became a space for them to share what did and didn't work for them, what they felt their greatest talents were, what they wanted from me or what they hoped for from our office. And it just became it became a solid foundation for us to build upon together. And really all it required was a handful of questions, and a lot of listening and affirming, repeating back to them. I took notes and I shared all my notes back out with everyone. And it was a really powerful way to just hear what was on everyone's mind. And share that back with them to demonstrate that I was listening. I heard them. I believed what they were sharing about their experiences. And that became a foundation for us to build on together.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you for that example of being able to actively listen and share the information back. And we all could use a little bit more listening in our world right now. The second scenario that we have here is around a little bit of a modeling, is around workplace diversity. And this is specific to getting us to think about how we build empathy. And in particular, you all are in a meeting and you're talking about diversity in the workplace. And this could be shifts. We're seeing a lot of organizations roll back their commitments to diversity, change positions, no longer fund opportunities. And imagine yourself in a meeting and someone just says, look, we've been talking about these changes for years and nothing has happened. How many folks have heard that happen in a meeting and will just kind of look sideways as if nothing has been said? And so again, as a mediator or a leader, when this happens, we know it will happen, and it's probably happening right now in your organizations. Great intervention is just saying, hear that this really matters to you, and it's the lack of progress is frustrating. Let's dig deeper. How can we address this? Part of conflict is being able to be empathetic with what's being said, but be able to name the issue. The lack of progress is frustrating. The last thing a person who said wants is for people to just go on like nothing never happened. But here, the goal is to ensure that people feel heard, but you're also wanting to think about as a group of people, how can we pay attention to what's happening and figure out ways to address it. So anybody ever has a question or have been in an experience where empathy has been a challenge in the conversation, someone has said something and people just ignore it and keep going? Okay. Looks like something in the chat box that said many of us have said that. Very, very true. And what we're encouraging you here again is to think about being more brave in how you show up, to actually say, I hear that this is frustrating, and how might we address it? Go ahead, Kim, and then we'll move to the next one.
So just really quickly, and you don't have to delve deep into it, but like you talk about triggers. I didn't think about this being a trigger, but this is a trigger for me. And it is because I've said that in meetings before. And just to go to, I think if I think about the current context upon in which I work, if I had said what was said about, we've been talking about this, and somebody came back to me and said, let's take a closer look at what's happening. Internally, I feel like I would not, that would not be an acceptable answer for me. And even though I see that the person is trying to be empathetic, it would just definitely feel like it's even sometimes even a worse way of just ignoring it.
And I think here, thank you for sharing that. And I want to dig a little bit deeper because I hear you. I think taking a closer look and how we can address it effectively is inviting the group to go deeper. So in this context, it wouldn't be, I understand it's lack of progress is frustrating. Maybe I need to put a question mark at the end of that. Take a closer look at what's happening and how can we address it effectively, as in a question mark, right? Because it is meant to open and invite in conversation. Let's take a closer look. What's happening and how can we address it effectively? Thank you for bringing that up, because we don't want to make a person feel like it's over. What we want people to think about is we need to go deeper to ask what's actually happening in the space. Okay. I know we're at the 43 mark, so I'll just go to this one and then hand it over to Dr. Heiser, and then we'll finish the last two, and then we have two more sources to share. So conflict identification, being able to name what a conflict is. And sometimes in conversations, we just keep going, don't name what's going on. So again, we wanted to bring scenarios about the workplace. So you're in a conversation about hybrid work policies at work. Some people want folks in the office, some people don't. Again, we tried to bring things that were both equity related, real-time things that's happening every day. And this is a real conversation that's happening around hybrid and people actually being able to have flexibility or come into the office. And there are some people with some really strong viewpoints on both of these sides. And so one way that you can intervene in this is to say there's tension revolving around team collaboration and flexibility. That is naming the conflict at hand. Let's explore how we can address both concerns effectively. So naming the conflict between coming into office and folks being more flexible out of the office, and then let's explore how we address what the in-house rule conversation is and what is a need for flexibility. So in this portion, you would want to jot down, okay, let me hear some perspectives from folks who think we should be solely in office. Let me hear some perspective for folks who think we should be more flexible. Okay, what's the middle ground here? Want to clearly hit the conflict and then fight in both perspectives. So this is a key part of conflict resolution. Conflict skills is you open the door for people to engage some spicy conversation. And this is a
conversation.
What'd you say?
Spicy conversation.
Yeah, this is around making room for dialogue. Again, raising concerns, because our philosophy is we're asking people at a time right now to be more brave, bold. And this might not be in every meeting, but we invite you to be at every other meeting or maybe every 2 meetings. But the reality is it's going to happen outside of the group context. It's going to happen with somebody sending you a text message. It's going to happen with somebody in the room getting water, in the middle of the day. And having it there is not going to help the organization or the group engage in the larger conversation. It's going to, create some space venting, but it might not get you some end goals of naming the issues. And we want to point out people get upset at you, right? Because you are encouraging them to listen to the conflict. And in that case, we're going to talk about anchors and sanctuaries at the end so you can sustain yourself. I'm going to turn over to Dr. Heiser to talk about the last two skills, and then we will get you out here within our time frame. Any questions about the three I have raised thus far? Okay.
All right. So our fourth skill that we want to talk about is problem-solving orientation. And so this is the ability to guide a group through disagreements or something they're stuck on or dwelling on towards identifying solutions. And it leverages a collaborative approach to identifying solutions and conflict resolution. And so our scenario that we're offering to you is addressing workplace budget cuts. I'm sure I say facetiously, none of us have ever experienced that. I was in higher education during the time of COVID, where our institution was looking to make $85 million in budget cuts. So this is a scenario that's near and dear to my heart. So during a discussion about downsizing a training budget, employees voiced concerns about losing developmental opportunities. And so as one possible strategy in this scenario, or a strategy to facilitate problem solving, is to guide the group by asking things like, what training programs have the greatest impact on your work? What training programs are most meaningful to you? Or what developmental opportunities are non-negotiable or super important to you as somebody who works here and grows here? And then to challenge or encourage them to prioritize and explore creative ways to meet other needs within the new budget. This helps to focus energy on actionable solutions while addressing key concerns. It also empowers the people who have the challenges to co-create solutions. One one caution with this, that I think is really pertinent to budget cuts, is that there are moments in the journey of budget cuts or resource reductions where you do have the space to be creative. But if you are not in a position to really entertain creative solutions, or those who are supervising you are not interested in hearing creative solutions, just be upfront and transparent with that while trying to engage in problem solving. We don't want to set anybody up with false hope or to fail, right? So it's really important to be as transparent as is possible with the context and the situation, and then say what is within our power to do. What choices can we make? Can we enroll in a collective program together and get a discounted rate? Really just thinking through the most meaningful and substantive items to yourself and to the team. And finally, the last skill that we want to talk to you all about is patience, which is the ability to be calm and composed during a discussion that is ongoing or prolonged, or when emotions run high, allowing participants to express themselves fully. And this is really challenging, but one of the things we want to encourage you to think about when you work through this scenario, this strategy, is how this approach can honor the humanity and dignity of each human's lived experiences and how these experiences can differ. And so in this scenario, we're thinking about workplace discussion on immigration. So during a workplace dialogue about how immigration policies impact employees of the organization, a participant becomes visibly frustrated, saying they feel misunderstood and that these policies disproportionately affect their community. One strategy as a facilitator or mediator in this space is to remain calm, allowing the participants to express themselves fully, and responding with something like, "Thank you for sharing your perspective. Let's take a moment to digest what you shared before we continue the conversation." This acknowledges the emotion in the room and helps to maintain a constructive environment. Oftentimes, when we're uncomfortable with conflict, we can rush to fill the space. We can sometimes respond or react for the sake of just keeping things moving. But what can be helpful instead is to create a pause, to just allow the emotion to be present and allowing everyone the opportunity to sit in the discomfort that that person is expressing, allowing the team the chance to recognize that this topic is impacting us differently, and we are living the experience of the immigration policy differently based on the social and demographic identities that we're bringing into the space.
So I just want to quickly just hop in and say, what happens when you've tried all 5 of those skills? You want to actively listen, you have sought to be empathetic and patient, identify the conflict, identify the problem, and somebody just shows up and they self that day, and they self that day is perpetuating racism or homophobia or transphobia or xenophobia. And so we want to offer 4 steps as a part of our consciousness raising process. We do not believe that we should let harmful behavior sit in the space. Dr. Heiser talked about this when she began with the what if slide. So we wanted to leave you with strategy that you can do in order to be able to address it in the if someone is doing something that's harmful in a conversation. Yes, we can exhibit all 5 of those skills. We love you enough not to leave you where you are. And so the 4 steps, trust yourself to use your power. So we encourage people, we don't wait on the DEI person. We don't want the person in our team is most out to say something. All play a role in shaping a society where we all can be respected. So trust yourself, something in your spirit, get present and ask what was unfair about this? Like, what is not sitting well in my spirit? If we take the last example about immigration is really big right now, right? So people are concerned about whether or not their family members are going to be accused of being undocumented, possibly rounded up by ICE. And so one of the things for us mindful of is that and me in that conversation on workplace immigration, my presence, me slowing down, what felt inequitable or what will feel inequitable in that situation is someone who's just coming in polarized and having no empathy for people as it relates to immigration. So in that context, what's unfair? A space where people are not receive any kind of respect for their feelings. So self-awareness, identify the challenges. For them, identifying that, there seems to be some bias on xenophobia, which is fear of people that are not from or fear of foreigners. I'm identifying like that comment felt a little xenophobic to me. And I don't just want to let it like it's okay. So what am I going to do with intentionality? I'm going to do an intervention. And I say, I love you not to leave you where you are. And we love because we don't believe perpetuating oppressive behaviors in order to address oppression. So I'll say that clearly. Just because you're nasty to me doesn't mean I have to be nasty to you to come in and share with you. Now, you might catch me on a rough day, and then that rough day, I'll come back and apologize. But for the most part, we try not to come in a way where we're nasty to other people. But we're not robots. Things happen. So there's 4 different examples here. I think the key thing I want you to understand, and you can come back and listen to the recording, is that there comes a time we to directly intervene, which is you make a this is not a question. This is not a slow move. This is direct. It's important for us to ensure all staff feel heard, seen, and respected and welcome at work. And while all staff are able to attend meetings, it is important for marginal groups to be supported. That's how I respond to the work, a conversation about xenophobia with immigration in the work. I'm setting the tone. It's important for everybody to feel heard, especially folks that are marginalized. Sometimes you have a little bit more time on your hand and you might use questions. And an example here is, someone is talking about the fact that LGBTQIA plus, family, one way is for them to, stop experiencing discrimination is for them to stop being so sensitive. We hear people say this all the time. Don't be so sensitive. What I tend to do is we say you can repeat the statement that the person said, and you're repeating the statement because you want it to register to them. Hey, something happened. That's that self-awareness piece. And then you want to say, can you help me to understand what you mean by comment? And you're putting the work back on that person. What do you mean by this? right? And then you might follow up with the intervention, but just slowing them. Most people don't expect for you to stop them when they say very horrific things. And then questioning, this is if you have time on your hand and you don't like conflict. And someone on here said that they're not a conflict person, but I'm glad you showed up today to the workshop. You know, question another way. Can you say more? What kinds of experiences have made you feel that way? How are these portrayals affecting your perception? I am putting the work back on the person who did the comment, but here I'm engaging you in some more thoughtful questions. So this is for people who are less who are conflict avoidant, or I'm not going to conflict avoid that, you know, conflict is not the first thing that they want to do. You know, these statements and questions are a way for you to still address it in the moment, but it's sort of a slow build to that point. So any questions about this 4-step process? No, we're filling you all with lots of resources that you can come back and listen to later. Okay, I'm going to turn over to Dr. Hyatt to just give you again three more sticks and trade, and then drop some handouts and invite some questions.
And so the last resource we want to share with you is really just, at the end of the day, if you take nothing else away from this, like 3 ways to hear, see, and respect one another in your environment. So the first is active listening, and we can best summarize this by saying listening to understand, not reply. And this can be getting curious, affirming what someone is saying, or repeating what someone is saying, asking further questions to deepen understanding. One of the expressions that I hear Dr. Fisher use a lot, and I know she has the direct citation, is the song beneath your words is, or what I'm hearing underneath what you're saying. Because sometimes, right, when people are upset, they say things, but sometimes what they're not saying is the source of discomfort or frustration. And active listening allows us to pick up on both. Acknowledging lived experiences, recognizing that how we are walking through the world, how I walk through the world is different, and how I experience the world is different than how Dr. Fisher walks through the world and experiences the world. Acknowledging that, but respecting that, listening deeply and affirming that, hey, we are not having the same experience right now. How can I support you right now? And so the last tactic that we'll give you is collaborative decision making, right? Co-creating solutions in order to center the heart of the problems that people are facing. A philosophy that we adopt oftentimes, and this stems from like culturally responsive evaluation, equity-centered evaluation, is that the people closest to the problem are often best positioned to solve it. And so if your team is facing a challenge, they are the best position to help brainstorm and think about ways to address that challenge. I think that's the end of those are our 3 ways to hear, see, and respect your colleagues.
And we will end this. You know, there's a lot going on in this world, and the reality is that we're going to have to find ourselves in some practices in order to stay sane and in order to be able to keep showing up in our best selves. This hand will be included in your follow-up email from us, but we invite you to have some grounding and renewal practices. So anchors are things you can do in the moment. If you find yourself feeling stressed or challenged, taking a 5-minute meditation or prayer, or just asking yourself what's giving you hope like we did, or getting up and take a movement break, walking around the building, or taking a walk outside if it's not snowing like the Midwest. And then sanctuaries are daily practices that you can do, that we recommend everybody have a sanctuary that you do every day in order to stay in hope and ground yourself. For some people, that's exercising. For some people, that's having their favorite cup of tea in the morning. For some people, that is having a journal where you're writing 5 things that you love, you know, every day. But these are specific practices that you can take to sustain yourself. We are in, we are in some very dark and uncertain times, and we don't want to minimize that. And we do believe while we give you strategies on how to get through it, you also got to take care of your spirit in the process of navigating these uncertain times. And so this is the handout that's been dropped in the chat box for you. Basically, it takes this entire workshop and talks to you if you wanted to have a conversation, a dialogue in your organization. We teach you exactly what we did with you. We gave the reflection question on connecting to we gave you some sample norms. We gave you examples on how to integrate the skills, and we gave you example on how to disrupt bias. So this is the workshop in a nutshell. Feel free to download it, share it with other your organization, post it visibly and use it during these times. And then there's a QR code if you want to learn a little bit more about our Bridge and Dialogue for Change program. We have people on the call who's actually going through this program, so it was nice to see some of their faces to get a refresher. And just think about something that you want to pass on to somebody else. You chose to spend your lunch hour with us. What can you take on to somebody else? Maybe in the handout, maybe it's Anchors and Sanctuaries. We must pass on what we are getting here to someone else. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording. Dr. Heiser and I are going to hang on the call in case there's some things that you want to ask us about, some free coaching on that's not going to be video. Thank you all so much for me. Please scan the QR code and give us some feedback. We'd love to hear it.